Hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. Now, today we raise a glass to Tristram Stuart, the environmental campaigner turned beer brewer, who says if you want to change the world, you have to throw a better party than those who are destroying it. And Tristram joins us today to tell us more. Tristram, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
One of my producers said just before the show came on, he said toast is one of the things I have with my breakfast, but you've created a great beer brand out of what a lot of other people have in their morning breakfast routine. Tell us more.
Well, what we've done is essentially identify one of the really major sources of food waste in the world, and that is bread. Bread's one of the most wasted foods. It's wasted on a colossal industrial scale while it is still totally fresh and good to eat. And this has been bugging me, making me angry for quite a long time. And then I discovered in 2015, thanks to a brewer in Belgium, that beer was invented by the ancient Mesopotamians to convert bread and other grains that would otherwise be wasted into a long, stable liquor that could be drunk throughout the year.
So that was mead, was it?
That was beer. That was the original beer. The original beer was designed. Fermentation is a preservation technique, first and foremost. The inebriation that results is a happy sort of side effect.
Outcome of that process. But I mean, essentially, it's a great example of using innovation to come up with a clever idea, because increasingly toast is a brand a lot of people are beginning to see.
Yeah, so what we're doing essentially is reminding the global brewing industry that their original purpose was to preserve grains that would otherwise be wasted, bringing beer back to its roots and using it to solve one of the modern day's biggest environmental and social problems, which is the fact that we waste 1/3 of all of the world's food.
Right. We'll get on to that, and because I know that is what really drives your kind of interest in this. But I mean, in terms of the beer business, in terms of what you've created, give a sense of where can you find it? I want to drink it, but I want to have a taste of it.
So fortunately, the first ever bottle of toast ale was drunk by no other than Jamie Oliver on television.
And he liked it very much.
He called it Bloomin' Lovely, which became the name of one of our beers. And since then, we've won international awards, blind taste testing. These are not people who like our eco credentials. They love our beer. It's just, you wouldn't even know it had anything funky in it.
Can you go to the pub and buy it?
Yeah, you can go to the pub. You can get it in some of the national supermarkets, Tesco, Waitrose, Co-op in London, a stocking toast ale. We're being stocked by some of the Fuller's pubs now. It's really taking on. It's a classic beer. We've got about 4 different SKUs, whether you like lager or ale. And first and foremost, it is just a damn good drink. What I'd say is that, if you had a car that used 1/3 less fuel than all others, but otherwise drove as fast and was as comfortable, it'd be pretty much immoral to drive anything else. Kind of same thing. We think it's almost immoral to drink anything other than, toast ale now.
Do consumers, when they're buying toast, do they understand that backstory? Do they understand? I mean, are they buying it as a great drink with a cute logo, or do they actually understand the fact that there's actually a campaigning ethos behind this?
Yeah, I can remember right in the early days meeting a bunch of bankers down in Temple Brew House, where we've been brewing some of this beer, and they all ordered toast ale. I was at the bar. I said, "Oh, good choice." They said, "Yeah, there's loads of craft ales here. This is the best one." I said, "Wow, thank you. It's my company." I then started to tell them the story, and they were, "Oh, wow, that's really cool. That's a nice story." Then I said, "We give all of our profits to charity." They were like, "Get out of here! We don't want this beer anymore. You can't make money from it."
Too much of it. Yeah. That is another part of the narrative, I guess. The 100% of profits going into charitable organisations. I mean, it's interesting that food seems to be a particular part of the economy where there is a real activism, if you like, a real sort of, we had the Rubies in the Rubble founder, Jenny Cockrell, recently. Many others where food seems to be the vehicle where you can make a difference. I mean, how did you cotton on to the fact that that could be something where you could actually make your mark?
Oh, right. That's my whole life. Food is the biggest negative story there is. It's the biggest impact humans have on the planet. It's the main cause of deforestation, biggest source of climate change gases, biggest user of fresh water, soil erosion, species extinction, all coming down to the way in which we produce food in this profligate industrial way. That said, we already know how to do food in a way that actually replenishes the environment and the resources that we have. And it brings people together. I love the word companion. Companion literally means com is with and pan is bread. By coming together and sharing food, humans build friendship. A bottle of beer is the message in a bottle, it's companionship in a bottle. We can use food to bring people together, to connect them with each other, to connect them with nature in a way that actually replenishes the earth.
And when you take, I mean, that story of the companionship company, I've heard you speak about that before. And it's a very life affirming one. But when you sort of look at the problem that you've outlined, the sort of the big food problem, I mean, is it the big food brands? Is it the supermarkets? When you take aim, I mean, where do you see the kind of the crosshairs of the problem?
Yeah, I mean, it is endemic. It's throughout the entire system. But I have spent a lot of time working on the way in which supermarkets cause an awful lot of the food that is wasted up their supply chains, and of course in our homes by marketing this stuff.
I mean, I was reading here, you spent much of your time at university literally living out of supermarket bins.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
what did you find?
Oh, you can live like a king or queen. It's every imaginable possible product that you've ever seen in any supermarket. Some of it ends up in their dumpster. Well, it's still perfectly good to eat, and it's not just when I was a student. For most of my adult life, I have royally fed myself and my friends with food that would have been wasted. It started as a private endeavour. I then wanted to scale it up, and indeed started kind of feeding several thousand people at a time from food that wasn't actually in the bin but would have been put in the bin.
I mean, you wrote a book, Waste: Uncovering the Global Food Scandal. I mean, if you were to sort of summarise that scandal for us, what do viewers need to know in terms of what is really going on behind the scenes?
We waste at least a third of the world's food supply. This is mainly driven in the West by the corporations that have an interest in producing more food than is needed, marketing it to everyone. Doesn't matter if it's wasted, it can increase the profit margins of their corporations. This is despoiling the earth. It's also the root cause of obesity and diabetes and all these overconsumption health problems that we have. And we, as the citizens of the world, we need to wake up to the way in which we are essentially helping to destroy our home planet.
And I think a lot of people are waking up to that message. I mean, but do you see this as about companies exploiting, or do you think of this in terms of consumers and their behaviours?
Obviously, we all have the power to impact our own behaviour. We can eat our leftovers, we can avoid buying too much, and up to a point, that's what we need to do. There are kind of moral premises that say, you know, we should be looking after the earth and each other. That said, if the system permits incredibly powerful corporations to spend billions of dollars, outspending government educational budgets by many, many factors, on getting us to buy drinks with more sugar than is good for us to consume in a day, lacing it with caffeine, which is a semi-addictive drug, and allowing 6-year-olds to buy that in a store, the odds are stacked against having a good healthy system.
I mean, you know, you mentioned that on a trip to Kenya, you saw 50% of green beans rejected for cosmetic reasons.
Right.
Pick up that story.
These are people who are living on less than $2 a day. They are growing food for our supermarkets, green beans and whatnot, when it's out of season here. And at the last minute, a supermarket can cancel an order, resulting in a farmer not just wasting 50% because they don't look perfect, but entire crops that they have spent their money and labour and land and water and all of that growing food for us, and then they don't get paid a penny. In the old days, we called that slavery. It's not a good story to have. It's happening in our supply chains. Right now, I have never been more ashamed of who I am than when I visited farmers in Africa who are not being paid for the food they're growing for us.
Is fair trade working as a brand, as an idea? Is it permeating in the way that it should?
It is, of course. Fair trade is very important, but the point is we shouldn't have unfair trade of that nature. It should be downright illegal, and indeed, in the UK, we passed a law in 2013 that says you cannot treat farmers in that way if you're a supermarket. You're not allowed to cancel orders. But it only works for farmers in this country. If you're a Kenyan farmer, you're not protected.
Right. I mean, but on that kind of field to fork journey, I mean, give us the other side of this. I mean, you know, the fridge. I mean, what do people at home watching this need to think about in terms of their own responsibilities, their own activism? What can they do?
Yeah, so everyone has a place where they can start, and your own fridge, your own plate, that's obviously, you know, if you've got some surplus food, you give it to a friend, make a friend out of that. You know, that's a responsible way of acting. Some people might want to go a step further and ask their supermarket why all the apples look identical, why don't they have all the kind of misshapes and the rest of it. They might want to volunteer
Ask the manager.
Yeah, ask the manager. You know, if you've got an opinion and you are disconcerted by, well, are they donating surplus food at the end of the day? Go and ask. Hold them to account. They listen to that kind of thing. But if you want to go a step further, you might want to go and volunteer for one of those organisations that are solving this. And if you want to go a step further, you might want to involve yourself in the rebellion against the mass species extinction event that we're seeing in the middle.
Well, don't start on that, because we're going to start on that as my very next question when we come back after the break. Now, we're going to be back very, very shortly, and when we do, we move from the business of beer to Tristram's campaigning work. He's mentioned some of that, but also a brilliant campaign called Feed the 5,000. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. My guest today is the food waste campaigner Tristram Stuart. Now, Tristram, before the break, you mentioned Extinction Rebellion. You are and are a supporter of this. Give us a sense of what you've been up to, what it's about.
Well, let me start just by pointing out, with all humility, the fact is that we are in the middle of the 6th mass species extinction event. We humans are driving the most colossal ecological change, destroying habitat. Species are going extinct every day. In my lifetime, half of all wildlife has been wiped out. We're still accelerating in the wrong direction if what we want is a sustainable society and economy. And the Extinction Rebellion and other movements like the school strike for climate, this Greta Thunberg movement, what they are manifesting is an increasing sense of urgency to the point of emergency. The fact that the governments of the world have been talking now for decades about sorting out climate change and other environmental problems, and have done next to nothing to protect the future, protect the present from ecological calamity. What the citizens of this world are doing are waking up to the fact that their future, their children's future, is in jeopardy, and we must act as if this were an emergency, because that's what it is.
So the emergency is what has stimulated the action. Because I mean, obviously you're a lifelong campaigner, but a lot of the people that have taken to the streets, this is possibly the first time they've ever done anything. I mean, is it that, have we reached this kind of tipping point where people see this in a very different way than perhaps previously they have?
That's exactly what's going on. My local postman in Sussex has been on the marches, in the road at Extinction Rebellion. He's woken up to the fact that, his grandchildren are in jeopardy. I fed on Waterloo Bridge. We had blocked Waterloo Bridge. The Extinction Rebellion rebels had held it for several days. A 90-year-old woman called Felicity, who was sitting in the tarmac, got out of her wheelchair, sat in the tarmac front line, said she wasn't moving until the police were going to drag her away.
I mean, you said some time ago that, you had to have more fun sort of saving the world than those that were possibly destroying it. Do you think that was the message of Extinction Rebellion? Do you think?
Anyone who came down to Oxford Circus during the Extinction Rebellion week and saw the pink boat cheekily placed right in the middle of the Oxford Circus, the parties, the dancing, the excellent talks from people from all over the world.
So there has been joy as part of this.
Oh, it was sublime and beautiful, and so diverse a crowd. Old people, young people, people from all over the world coming together with a kind of sacred appreciation of each other and the earth, as well as that kind of punchy activism, the kind of, we must do something about it. It wasn't just confrontation, it was primarily the imagination, the expression of what is it that we actually want in this world.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you're there, does the entrepreneur disappear? Does the campaigner? I mean, essentially a lot of this was about, capitalism, business, the unsustainability of growth. I mean, lots of things that presumably when you're sat with shareholders talking about toast were very much seen as the problem when you were actually, out there on the streets campaigning.
Absolutely not. I have created a business that is exactly the kind of thing that I think business is capable of doing, creating an economy that is in line with the planetary needs and the needs of the human population. I mean, you mentioned money and profit and capitalism. We make profit at Toast Ale. That's the whole idea. We just use that profit to fund organisations like Feedback, but also aligned organisations all over the world. We're brewing now in 7 different countries. We're supporting on-the-ground charities that are fighting to change the food system. We allow our shareholders, we have got investors, we allow our shareholders to appreciate their shareholding, get capital growth. That's the kind of kickback for them. We've just asked them to sign a pledge that says when they receive that capital growth, they have to reinvest it in another planet-saving organisation.
So profit,
and therefore,
profit is a good thing.
You can perpetuate good by making profit.
I mean, I heard one senior Democrat policymaker describe that the creation of every billionaire was a policy failure. I mean, do you sort of, I mean, does that sort of profit extend into personal wealth creation for business people, do you think?
I think what is being pointed to there is that we have an accelerating rate of inequality. The difference between the most wealthy and the least now is greater than ever before, and it is still accelerating in the wrong direction. When we look at what artificial intelligence and the kind of mechanization that Silicon Valley is going to wreak on the world economy and the wealth accumulation that will result in that, it is scary. These are machines, the corporations, that are going to have tools so powerful we may as well call them gods. And those gods are going to be on the leash of a few super wealthy billionaires.
Right.
That is an inherently dangerous situation for us to be in.
So,
Yeah.
and in terms of the correction to that, I mean, a lot of people are talking about business as a force for good, business as a force for change. Others are saying, you know what, it's just a slogan. The key here is tax more. Actually take more of this wealth away. The state needs to intervene. I mean, where do you sit on that spectrum?
Luckily, we can do both of those things at the same time. We definitely need to build the kind of economy from the bottom up. Entrepreneurs need to get involved, investors need to get involved, policy makers need to get involved in creating that good economy and perpetuating it and growing it. At the same time, you can create as much good business over here as you like. If you don't tackle the bad business, you may as well be doing nothing. You've got to do both. That means introducing regulations. Tax is definitely one of them. The fact that multinational corporations can essentially evade tax by hopscotching around the world, going to the lowest common denominator, that pits the nation states of this earth against each other in a race to the bottom. That is against the interests of the inhabitants of this planet, human and non-human. We need global collaboration and fair tax for global corporations. Right, that is number one thing.
So corporations, but presumably you would extend that to things like personal taxation.
Of course.
Yeah. So that needs to go up, do you think?
It needs to be fair and globally synchronized. That's the problem at the moment. Nation states have been outwitted by multinational corporations and people who are able to just sort of move into low tax jurisdictions. That's what the nation states of this world have to crack. We probably need a supranational body to decide that. A bit like the European Union that sits above all the European countries and says, this is in the interests of everyone, and we need to have it everywhere.
So that's the degree of the challenge we face, that it's not about whether you choose Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn. This is a much bigger...
No, the nation states are increasingly irrelevant as an institution in the world. They are being outmanoeuvred, and that is not good for any of us.
Okay, now you're born and bred in London. I mean, partially. We'll have to have words with the researcher, but the city has certainly been a shaper for you. When you look at it as a place for the sorts of views, opinions, the ideas that you're talking about, is it a good place for those ideas?
Gosh, it's a bit like the Death Star in Star Wars, but honestly, it goes around zapping planet Earth with the most colossal force and destruction.
What London does?
Yes, of course. We finance all of the worst things that happen in the world. It's happening right here under our noses. At the same time, from that very situation, you get the rebel forces from within, and there you can have an interesting chemistry that potentially harnesses some of.
So what we've got the whole cast of what? So what are we thinking? The the imperial forces, what in the city, and
Yeah.
and the sort of the rebellions in Shoreditch.
The difference between Star Wars when I was a kid and Star Wars now is now I know it's not just a movie; it's the real thing. The Force is with us, though, and we have to hope that by throwing a better party, by having more beautiful, enjoyable lives together, we can create a society and an economy that satisfies our human needs, that rejoices in the plenty that Earth gives us, without the need to exploit each other, destroy this wonderful, natural, living Earth that we've inherited and that we should be passing to our children.
And when you sort of, I mean, obviously, a lot of this interview, there's been some fairly bleak, tough messages for viewers to listen to. But I mean, do you remain optimistic? I mean, do you sort of, I mean, is this a sort of David Attenborough school of there's bad happening, but there's still time to sort it out? Or are you of this view that, which some people are saying, which is, you know what, this is now beyond the ability of people to actually sort the problem out?
Neither. It would be preposterous to be optimistic. The facts on the ground are that the trajectory is still accelerating in the wrong direction. The chances of arresting the mass species extinction event, if that's what we're talking about, like the destruction of nature on Earth, the chances of stopping that are vanishingly small. However, they're not zero. Let's say it's 1%. If it were 99% chance of success, most of us could sit back and relax. The fact that the chances are so small is why we all need to be up, whether we're bankers or activists or both. We all need to be up on our feet, shouting and screaming to wake up the giant, the citizenry of this world, invite them to our beautiful party, and change this system. If we don't do that, the future really is far bleaker, far more impoverished than it need be.
Right, Tristram, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed. I mean, we covered the lot there. Went from the challenges of the planet, with the odd glimpse of Star Wars, back to, though, the nature of what it means to be an activist in business today. So thank you very much for joining us, and it's all we have time for. Thank you to my guest, Tristram Stuart. Now, we often hear the term the social entrepreneur. Well, this is an entrepreneur who got very social with the message that there's a job to do in saving the environment. And you know what? The best way to achieve it is to have fun doing it. It's been a story of seeing plenty where others see crumbs. And Tristram reminds us that activist businesses are very much on the rise. And for more business leaders looking to be the next best thing since sliced bread, join me on the very next Capital Conversation. I'll see you then.